something that your soul wants and it's just a part of you, you'll thrive. And that's been a big help through my life, is just I never gave up. And I truly feel, I always say to everybody, never, ever give up on yourself. Because there's a million people out there that'll say you're no good, you're no this, but always believe in yourself. And if it's a passion, just pursue it, and it'll happen to you too.
Welcome to the Miracle Plant Podcast, the show that inspires, promotes, and gives you a daily dose of inspiration from the people who have used cannabis to change their lives in extraordinary ways. Here's your host, Justin Benton.
Welcome back to the Miracle Plant Podcast, where we discuss this miracle plant with so many names and how it's helping people in so many extraordinary ways. Well, today we have a best-selling author, K Savares. I hope I said that right. Welcome to the Miracle Plant Podcast, and thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm great. What a pleasure to be here with you and your audience, Justin.
Absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit about your story. I know you had some traumatic events happen in your life where, severe anxiety struck in your life, and I know that's what we deal with a lot with our products in this Miracle Plant. But tell us your journey, your story, and how you overcame.
Oh, I would love to share that with your audience, Justin. Yes, my journey with this severe anxiety, we all deal with anxiety through our lives, and you deal with it. And I was approaching this wonderful time in my life where the kids were going off to college, and I was an empty nester. Well, I had one left in the roost. And she was a senior in college. And boy, did I toe the line. Oh, this is the greatest thing ever. I'm going to be free there. Life is going to be different. I can do all these things I wanted to do. And at that point in time, this was several years ago, my goal in life was to become a traditionally published author. So I'm talking about 10 years ago. 10 years ago, self-publishing was not what it is today. We didn't have that available. It was almost taboo. So I always say I'm an overnight success, a 10-year overnight success. And, my degree was in business. I raised a family. I worked full-time. I worked part-time. I did all the stuff moms do. And, you're proud of your kids. And as I said, I was so excited that this was it. My life was going to change. Boy, did my life ever change. That senior year of the last child, all of a sudden, my limbs were becoming numb. I went through all these medical tests. They couldn't find anything. And at that point, the doctors start talking that little tablet, Xanax therapy. And I never spoke about this to anybody, Justin. And this is a problem that women and men deal with. And one of the reasons I never discussed this with anybody is I was ashamed. Women wear many hats, and we were supposed to be able to handle everything. And, I was handling it, but my mind was handling it in a different way. So at this point in my life, what was a hobby at the time, I was not published as yet, was really helping me get through things. I did the therapy, and yes, that was helping. The doctors say, here's the little pill. I took that little pill. But, today I am fortunate and I am thrilled to say I've crossed that bridge and I can look back. But anxiety is something everybody deals with. And what I had to come to terms with, Justin, and this is what took a year and a half of therapy, was that my family unit was dead. And as shocking as that is, what that means is the babies I raised, the toddlers I chased after, the teenagers I stayed up all night waiting to come home from their parties, those were dead, and I had to come to terms with it. I mean, I have my kids. They're young adults now, and life is different, but I had to let go of that aspect in my life. I crossed that bridge, and when I finally realized I was able to deal with that severe anxiety. And after a year and a half, I thought, I can begin to handle this. And I weaned myself. I was under a doctor's care, and I'm happy, thrilled to speak about this from, the medication that they had put me on. And you learn through therapy what you need to do when anxiety hits. But honestly, as your audience knows, and especially now, after we dealt with this COVID and we're still dealing with it, how anxiety can affect us.
Absolutely. And so I know that, the writing of the book, was that a part of it as far as like maybe finding a purpose or direction, a new focus now that the family unit was no longer the main focus?
Well, the writing, which was a hobby at that point, I was not traditionally published as yet. As I said, it took me 10 years before I wrote manuscript after manuscript. I spent so much time submitting to publishers, and the writing, because you're creating, and I'm an author, that I'm an award-winning, traditionally published fiction author, and I love to write with quirky titles, and I love to share that with your audience, and I have wonderful stories behind the titles, but that saved me, because what happens when your mind is not focused on just yourself 24/7, and you are concentrating on trying to create something, that was a big help to me to help relieve the severe anxiety I was going on, because I focused on the creativity. And I did the first book that was published was a murder mystery titled Tigers Love Bubble Baths and Obsession Perfume. Who knew? And the title comes from an event in my life. I visited this wildlife sanctuary in St. Augustine, Florida, and the last part of the tour was a vat, 15 feet wide, 5 feet high, overflowing with bubbles. And out walks this incredible creature, a 600-pound Siberian tiger. And he jumps into the vat of bubbles. The wildlife handler sprays Obsession perfume on his tongue. And Obsession perfume is an anxiety releaser for tigers. They love it. It calms them down. So I said to myself, that is the title of my next manuscript. And that was the first book that was accepted by a small publishing house and traditionally published.
That's amazing. That's so awesome. Yeah, finding purpose is so important for all of us to have. We're not here just to exist. We're here to thrive and to grow and to leave our mark or our contribution to humanity. So I think that's wonderful. I know that we deal with a lot of stress and anxiety, and a lot of people come to our stores, or they reach out to us for help. What was the obviously we're a holistic healing, and there's more than any one thing that you can do. But as far as getting off of the pills and things like that, how was that? How did that go? And what ultimately helped you wean off of those medications?
The tools through therapy, coming to realize what what was bothering me. There's something so that was so bothersome to me. And as I said, it was coming to terms with the fact that my family unit was dead and life was changing. And when I came to terms with that, and I was realizing, was I going to be on these meds for the rest of my life? And I used these tools. But at the time, several years ago, as I discussed with you, CBD was not available where it is today, and like a holistic way and all of this. So I didn't have that to deal with it. Then the doctors just prescribed the Xanax and the other medication. And I did become a little worried that it's a pill, but you have to have the tools. That's one thing I've learned. They give you the tools to work with to help you deal with anxiety. And writing was a big help for me.
That's wonderful. Well, and we do have a great product called Chill X, and I'd love to send you some. We'll get you a bottle out there for you to try. Raw hemp, like celery juice.
I look forward to that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And it also helps when you take it at night. It helps with sleep. And most people take it during the day. It's kind of like just getting that obsession cologne, but for adults who are stressed out, not tigers.
I love that. And then I went on to, because as I say, I love to write with quirky titles. And then I went on to write a trilogy, but the small publishing house that I was with was not interested in doing a trilogy. So I was fortunate in partnering with an all-female up-and-coming publishing house in Digner House, and they're publishing my trilogy, the first of which is titled The Girl in the Toile Wallpaper, and it is a fantasy adventure intertwined with romances. And it's always a joke as I interview, the interviewer will say, The Girl in the Toilet Wallpaper, and it's quite funny. But I love to write in fantasy because reality is too real for me.
Absolutely. Well, and do you have the book, the title of the third one, or is that one yet to be published?
The second one we are still in editing, and the title has to be finalized. Otherwise, I'd love to break the title on your podcast. And the third book will be published next year. So that manuscript is about, a little bit over halfway done. But the second book in the trilogy of The Girl in the Toile Wallpaper will be published early spring. So I'm looking forward to that. And again, writing is a big help in dealing with anxiety because I just focus on the writing. And Justin, there was a study that they did years ago where they had helped people that were dealing with post-traumatic stress syndrome, and when they were offered a job to work with watches, and just the intensity and all of that helped them with that. So it's true. If we can take because the mind is amazing, if you can just take it off of yourself and just apply it to something else, that's a learning tool, and that helps. So like hobbies, my hobby was writing, and it still is, but you don't have to write. People have so many other wonderful hobbies. It could be anything, gardening, you're an artist, you're this, something that, and what it is that gives you joy and pleasure because you can't wait to wake up in the morning and get to it. And I always say, if there's something that your soul wants and it's just a part of you, you'll thrive. And that's been a big help through my life, is just I never gave up. And I truly feel, I always say to everybody, never, ever give up on yourself, because there's a million people out there that'll say you're no good, you're no this, but always believe in yourself. And if it's a passion, just pursue it, and it'll happen to you too.
Well, I love that, and I think if you're struggling to find that passion, then I would just encourage you to close your eyes and put your hand on your heart and find a quiet place and go back to a time when you were a kid, when you were 7 or 8 years old, and what were the things that really excited you back then? What were the things that you loved to do? And I have a funny feeling you'll find those passions, whether it's playing sports or playing with your friends, or if it was doing a certain type of activity. A lot of who we are is when we're kids, we're all like, well, I want to be an astronaut. For me, it was I wanted to be a third baseman for the New York Mets, and that I ran that course as long as I could. But now I'm involved in sports with my kids and coaching baseball and taking them to ball games and things like that. So we can find those hobbies or those passions, and sometimes can turn into careers like they did with you, when we remember the things that brought us joy when we were younger.
Right.
So
and I love what you just said, where you took your kids, and that, you know, that is such a passion of our lives too, is to be with family, and that gives you such tremendous joy. And as I said, and I think that was part of my problem, that as I said, the kids that I raised, that, you know, they're young adults, and you don't spend as much time with them because they're living their lives, and you've actually done what you're supposed to do, is get them out of the house, right? That's your job. My job was finished. Now I can look at them and have a life with them in a different regard, and I had to come to terms with that. And it's all good, but it's crossing a bridge. And once you're able to cross that bridge and look back and say, you know, it's almost a blessing, because it's a journey, and we learn from journeys.
Absolutely. So well said. Well, at the end of, before we go, where can people find this book?
Yes, you can find my books anywhere. I'm on Amazon. I am on Barnes & Noble's, any independent bookstore. If it's not on the shelf, they'll get it the next day. And it's Mary K Savares, Tigers Love Bubble Baths and Obsession Perfume, Who You, if you love mystery romances with a supernatural twist, or if you're into fantasy, adventure, and romance, then The Girl in the Tall Wallpaper, the first in the trilogy. They're all award-winning books, and they're bestsellers on Amazon. And you can also connect with me on my author website, www.MaryKSavares.com, MaryKSavares.com. I love to hear from my readers and anybody else.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Miracle Plant Podcast. And at the end of every podcast, we say heal the world, because that is our mission, to reach 1 billion people by 2025 with your audience and with everybody out there, teaching these new ways to take control of your health and, in fact, your mental health. So I thank you so much for joining us. So join me on the count of 3. We're going to say heal the world. And for those that are listening, join us as well, because we're looking to raise the vibration, to help each other, to lift humanity, where we can each help each other find ways to heal ourselves. So on the count of 3, let's say heal the world. 1, 2, 3.
Heal the world.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, and make sure you tune in next week to the Miracle Plant Podcast. We're on Twitter and Clubhouse and Spotify and Apple. And if you like this episode, rate and review it and share it, and let us know. You can reach us at themiracleplant.org. Thanks, everybody, for swinging by the Miracle Plant Podcast. Be a blessing to each other, and happy healing.
Thanks for listening to today's show. To check out more great cannabis podcasts, go to PodConx.com. Here's a preview of one of our other shows.
Cannabis Health Radio is a podcast about stories from people around the world who have used cannabis to deal with serious ailments, many of them life-threatening. My name is Ian Jessup. My co-host Corey Yelland is no stranger to the devastating emotional impact faced by so many people receiving a death sentence diagnosis from a doctor. Told she only had months to live with anal canal cancer, Corey researched and immediately began using cannabis oil to eliminate her cancer and has been cancer-free for more than a decade. She told herself that if it worked, she would spend the rest of her life helping others, which she does tirelessly every day. When you listen to our podcast, you'll hear many stories like Corey's, along with others who have used cannabis oil for many more ailments besides cancer, such as chronic pain, PTSD, MS, and many, many more. As one of our guests said, "Your podcast gave me the confidence to save my own life." We regularly get messages from listeners who have heard our podcast and use cannabis to solve a serious health issue of their own or that of a loved one. We hope you listen to these stories and be as inspired and moved as we are with each and every episode.